Everybody Hates Rand is a Wheel of Time podcast that will contain spoilers for all 14 books. So if you're anti-spoiler, stop this, read all 14 books, and come back. We'll be here, waiting.
Our title is a joke and is meant to be taken as such. Everybody in this context refers to us and our cats. You are free to feel however you want about Rand. He's a fictional character. Please don't DM us.
The world is a mess, Dark One stretching out his hand. The dragon's reborn, the fire's been fanned, but everybody hates Rand. Everybody hates Rand. Everybody hates Rand.
Well, our 200th episode really snuck up on me, which is embarrassing because I'm the one who edits the podcast. So every week I have about 2 hours to really contemplate what number of episode we're on. And yet,
That's okay.
it didn't occur to me till last week.
We'll do something to celebrate sometime.
I think we could, just hold out till episode 250, which is about when we'll be turning the corner between Knife and Dreams and Gathering Storm, which will be a real cause to celebrate. Not because Robert Jordan died.
That's not what we're saying, no!
That's not what I'm saying.
Hold on.
But because, I don't know, things will take a new and spicy turn. Not in the plot. The plot will still be pretty boring, but, we'll have different things to criticize once Brandon's at the wheel.
Yeah, we could have a Dawn of Branderson celebration.
Oh man, the Dawn of Branderson.
Be a holiday.
We can just I can try and remember the plots of the Brandon Sanderson books I've read.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a lot of them. I've read quite a few, but unfortunately I cannot remember more than 4 character names in the wealth of Branderson
Yeah.
books I've read, so that would really put a damper on things. Unfortunately, we're contractually obligated to at least make a passing reference to these chapters.
Not.
So this is Everybody Hates Rand, episode 200 of your friendly neighborhood Wheelie Time podcast. I'm Emily Jushaw.
I'm Sam Winchester.
And if you can hear a sort of slurping noise in the background, that's Tibble licking himself. You're not Sam Winchester. Don't sell yourself short.
Oh, thanks. I'm not Sam Winchester. I'm Sally Kutcher.
You're a much more three-dimensional character than Sam Winchester.
God, I hope so. Sam has no personality.
I don't know. He's truly...
Except younger brother sibling.
Truly the worst.
Syndrome.
Younger brother sibling.
This is my younger brother sibling.
We already had... The funny thing is that we already had a Supernatural episode with guest star Brie Olds.
Well, no, we did. I forgot about that.
It was iconic.
That was fun.
We'd love to have friends of the podcast on. Let us know if you'd like us to have any other friends on.
Yeah, we don't have a ton.
Yeah, we don't have many.
We could find someone.
We could have my sister on.
I was just about to say it'd be really funny. We can have an Our Flag Means Death episode with Sarah.
Oh man, she'd love it. Sarah hyperfixates on things like no one else, so... Okay, here's the chapter summary of what happened in the last 2 chapters of Matt's arc in Winter's Fart. We pick up with Matt waking up, well, not waking up, because as you pointed out last time, he doesn't really sleep. He's too busy thinking about contingency plans.
Yeah.
But he gets up the morning of the big escape and goes about doing some things. He confers with Nerim and Lopin, MVPs, his 2 serving men, who originally belonged to Nalishan and Talmanes. I think, what's that word?
Respectively?
I think respectively, but I can't remember.
Yeah, Nerim and Nerim and Lopin have a bit of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern syndrome in my head.
A little bit, yeah.
They're
They're
the
sort of
same person.
interchangeable, yeah. And also, just like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, are they in love?
Yes.
Yes.
I 100% believe they are married.
I'd like to think so, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, how could you not be? Listen, there's no better fodder for a gay romance than having to be reluctant manservants for the same man because your former master just either A, died, R.I.P. Nalshan.
Yeah,
or
and
B,
your masters are all
That's true.
gay
They're all
and love.
boyfriends. They're all a polycule.
Yeah, so, and I don't know, it's a sort of enemies to lovers.
Yeah, because they're like, no, I'm the better manservant.
Yeah, no, I'm the better manservant. But then eventually they begin to see the benefits of each other's points of view, and they begin to really respect and admire each other's work ethics, both of which are very strong.
That's true.
And really see where the other one is coming from, and mutual respect turns to friendship, turns to passionate lovemaking.
Exactly.
And then marriage.
And then marriage.
And I guess they adopt Oliver.
Yeah, and they're like, this is our ugly son.
Nerim and Lopin's part of the plan, because it's funny to imagine Matt and this, like, huge coterie of people leaving, but really he has, like, separated them out into groups so that, you know, the less conspicuous people can leave the city without being hindered by the most conspicuous people, i.e. the escaping Aes Sedai and Matt himself. So, Nerim and Lopin, along with Oliver and, like, half of the remaining band of the Red Hand, are leaving the city just mid-afternoon. They are leaving with all of Matt's money that he has squirreled away and, like, his clothes. So, and they're just piecing out. There's, like, a designated rendezvous point, and it's a pretty funny little, you know, interchange between Matt and them, where he's like, tell me again what the plan is, and they're like,
We've told you 100 times. Okay, I really respect that Nerim and Lopin have good ethics and they would not do this, but how funny would it be if they just cut and run
the
with
fuck
all
out
Matt's
with
money?
Matt's millions of dollars? So
they
funny.
ran away and got married and lived happily off of Matt's fortunes.
I know, I also think it's so funny that Matt is like, okay, and if I don't show up in a few days, then go and find Talmony. So, like, their children.
Yeah.
Go find mom.
Go find mom.
Oh, so good.
Okay, yeah, they go. The plan is to go find Talmonies, which they should all just do anyway.
I know, you just peace out from the circus immediately, go find Talmonies. Maybe that is the plan originally, but they just get caught up with the circus a little bit. They're also leaving with the majority of the horses, by the way. Meanwhile, Matt goes about his routine, which involves, we neglected to mention this last time, he has been, like, going out in the courtyard and just riding his horse in little circles to sort of build up his stamina, because his broken leg and hip, have made it really painful for him to ride. So he is sort of conscious of that, and he is also aware that it makes more public the idea that he is soon to be leaving. And he is, again, trying to establish that he is very much about to leave, that it is not necessarily connected to the Demon leaving, and that Tylet is not involved. So he goes out, does that, has a brief little conference with Vannon out there. He sees Tom heading over to the inn, because Tom's job of the day is to go basically soothe Jolene over at the Wandering Woman. He's like a Percocet human.
Yeah, give her
Xanax.
some Vicodin.
Yeah.
God, R.I.P. Tom. What a shitty job. Jolene is deeply unpleasant.
Tom is just...
Jolene.
Okay.
Sorry, I keep interrupting.
No, it's okay.
I'm a little loopy today.
Matt also asks Beslin to set a few fires in the city to do a distraction. And Beslin's all upset because he's like, I wanted to do the full revolution tonight or whenever. And Matt's like, okay, well, I'm just asking you to, do some light arsons.
Yeah, arson light.
Yeah, arson light TM.
Yeah.
Diet arson.
Diet arson.
Just arson zero sugar. And
men.
For men. Arson for men. And I want you to look like you're not involved at all, just get some, cronies to go set some fires, because as we have also previously referenced, the Shanshin are out more in force at nights, because of the Golem attacking people, so Matt's trying to work around that problem. So Beslin's kind of annoyed, but he's like, fine, I'll do that. So Matt just does this all day. It's shaping up to be like a horrible weather day. Lots of rain. Lots of, stormy weather. And one of the prevailing things going on here is that you'll catch a lot of references to Matt referring to, I mean, the second chapter in this little section is called What the Aelfin Said. And Matt references that a few times. You know, like, he'll be like, if I get caught, then I'll be facing the executioner, and, you know, I've been told that I'm fated to die once, but I think that already happened, da-da-da-da-da. So we're already sort of, like, setting up toward this moment with Tuon at the end. Matt passes most of the afternoon just in his room, waiting. Finally, when night falls and it's pretty deep in, he goes out to the front of the palace, or the side or whatever, to meet Egion and Doman, which he does, and they are, you know, accompanied by, like, Jolene's warders are holding lamps to make it look like a full Shantan retinue, you know, right. Stuff like that. So Matt, accompanied by Egion, maybe just Egion, go up to the Daman quote-unquote kennels, accompanied by Egion and the 3 Soldam that are coming with them, which are Rena, Sita, and Bethamin. I should get a cookie for remembering.
Yeah, that was really
names.
Impressive.
Thanks, everyone. And Matt's just like, it's so funny to me how Matt is just, like, totally uninterested in finding out, like, why Egion is able to get these 3 involved. He's just like, I don't care, as long as they do what they're told.
They do their job, you know? It's not my business.
It's a sort of uncharacteristic lack of curiosity from Matt, but also, you know, the unstoppable force of Matt's curiosity coming up against the immovable object of his wariness of women who can channel and anything involving that. So they go up to the kennels. The Soldam go to fetch Teslin and Edicina, while Egion is sort of standing watch. Matt, meanwhile, is like, I have to run an errand, and goes into one of the rooms to wake up one of the Shanshan Windfinders. We don't know that he's going to do this until he is already doing it. Mm-hmm. Sort of seems like Matt himself doesn't know he's going to do it until he's already doing it. And I don't know, it's one of the I like it. It's just Matt and this woman having a very, like, he wakes her up and is like, what'll you do if I let you out? And she's like, I'll wake everyone else up and we'll get out and join our people. And he's like, okay, rad, I'm Matt. And she's like, great, and, like, spits in her hand, Sea Folk style, and he spits in his hand, you know, and it's just it's just an interesting moment, I think, where these moments are so rare in Wheel of Time, where it seems like gender is always the number one thing on the stage. You know, it's like every interaction between a man and a woman, gender is the third person in the room.
Yes.
Which is really annoying. So it's nice to have this moment between Matt, a man, and a woman, where it just feels like they are 2 people interacting.
Yes.
And it's frustrating because then what we're seeing is that Robert Jordan is capable of doing it and he chooses not to.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's some implications there. Maybe it's only happening because it's dark, so Matt can't see her to comment on
on the
her
size
rack.
of her breasts.
Yeah, or what she's wearing, or, I mean, she'd be wearing the same Daman uniform or whatever, but it's just, like, a very human moment between them.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's a very lovely moment.
And in terms of, like, you know, there are so many problems that we encounter more in modern media, especially in terms of, like, the white savior movement. But what I like about this here is that Matt is doing the first thing, but then it is up to this Windfinder and all of her compatriots to do the rest.
Yeah.
You know, like, there is a sense of agency here, and as far as I know, they succeed.
Yeah, it's definitely got more of the vibe of being, like, a collaboration.
Yeah.
Like, Matt is assisting the movement rather than being the movement. You know?
But this is just, in terms of Matt's character, sort of the prime example of Matt being unable, Matt's sense of honor. He feels like he can't let out 2 Aes Sedai without giving all of the other women who have been imprisoned a, like, fair shot.
Right.
You know, so.
There's also a great exchange in this interaction where the Windfinder says, you are a good and a great man, and Matt says, I'm just a gambler.
I know. I'm just a gambler and a farm boy.
Yeah.
God, Matt.
It's just like, wow, show-stopping.
Yeah, wow,
what a great
show-stopping. Really.
You are a good and a great man.
I'm just a gambler.
I'm just a gambler.
I start crying
I know.
in the background. Then we have a comedic genius scene where Matt walks out of the room and right behind a Soldam who is talking to Edgiana and who is frantically sort of trying to de-escalate the situation and be like, yes, I am authorized to take some Damon from the kennels. And Matt, unnoticed by this Soldam, sort of is coming up behind her like to, I don't know, get her in a chokehold or something.
Yeah.
And Edgiana's like, no! And like works that into the conversation. It's just one of those classic, you know, moments. So then Matt backs away slowly and just goes down the stairs.
Yeah.
Horrified.
Yeah.
Terrified.
It would be pretty funny if you just gave her a bonk.
Yeah, just
A Sasuke
like,
bonk.
like Fezzik. To the albino guy.
Yeah. Ugh, we should watch The Princess
I
Bride.
love The Princess Bride.
It's a great
One of the
movie.
world's most hilarious pieces of media. Matt then goes downstairs. Oh, no. Matt goes back to his rooms to fetch his things, his last couple things, the Ashandere among them. And who should he run into but Tylin, who's back very late at night and unexpectedly early. And Matt's like, what the H? And she's like, yeah, Sarath, who I just wanted to call Sulin because their name's supposed to start with S-U. Sarath received word of some sort of army disappearing in Murundi, which is a reference to Edwin's army traveling all in one day to Tarvalon away from Murundi. So sort of a reference / timeline point there. You know, we get these rare points where, okay, here's where two events are converging with two separate storylines. But she looks at him and immediately recognizes that he is leaving, and also that she can't stop him. And he's like, you could come with me? And she's like, absolutely not. Do you think I want to sleep in a tent or whatever? I'm the queen. And he's like, okay, well, fine, it wasn't really a genuine offer, whatever. Blah, blah, blah. He's like, okay, I tried to make it so that they won't connect me leaving to you. And I think he tells her everything that's going on. And she just is like, okay, well then you have to tie me up. So what we have here in this moment of Matt tying her up is what in the moment is framed to be funny. Tylin is bossing Matt around, trying to make sure that his knots and the way he's tying her up is as competent as possible and like will not lead to anyone questioning the situation or that she was legitimately tied up and couldn't escape, you know. But what we find out in the next book or two is that shortly after Matt leaves, the Ghulam comes, finds her tied up, and kills her in a particularly gruesome way. And so all of this humor about like her being like, now you have to make sure that I can't escape and that I can't even scream for help or whatever, is then tinged with horror. And it becomes this sort of like horror movie scene that is being set up but has not yet happened. Which, I don't want to give Robert Jordan too much credit for that, but in a way that's sort of the perfect icing on the cake for Matt and Tylin's whole relationship, which is that it's framed comedically, but sort of, as you look back on it, is just this absolute horror show. Mm-hmm. So, oh, and I also want to point out that, yet again, we have Robert Jordan punishing a woman. Not, I would say, for being a rapist, but for acting in a way that women do not traditionally act. Mm-hmm. As Robert Jordan has made painfully clear to us over the last few books, Tylin's crime is not that she has sex with Matt against his will, it is that she is a woman pursuing a man. Mm-hmm. And like, you know, just as I think we've made this correlation many times, but like the difference between characters who are bad guys getting punished by the narrative and the difference between the author sort of omnipotently reaching down and punishing people is sort of a matter of pattern, but also you can generally tell it by like whether the punishment is at all correlated to the crime itself. So like a great the example I thought of this morning in the shower when I was thinking about this was in Game of Thrones, the show, not the book. I don't know if this happens in the books. There's a really gross moment in one of the later seasons where what's his name? Ramsey, the really gross sociopath guy who, has his feral dogs and just tortures people and whatever. Sansa, who was raped by him, just, sets his dogs on him so that he dies. So in that way, the punishment is correlated to the crime because it is his victim stepping up. Whether that is justice or revenge is another question entirely, but it's correlated. Opposed to that is when Ramsay, earlier on in the plot, mutilates Theon, tortures and mutilates him. And that might seem like punishment from the author because Theon has done really gross, gruesome things prior to that in the plot. He betrayed the Stark family, and I think one of the kids died because of him. Or something else. He killed some kids? I can't remember. He did bad things, and so now a bad thing is happening to him. Mm-hmm. But they're not at all related. Ramsay's not doing it because Theon did bad things. He's doing it because he's Ramsay and he wants to hurt people. So, hopefully that clears up any
No, that was a great
confusion.
example. I also think there's, a level of gratuitousness with Robert Jordan.
And both of those examples I just pulled were also very gratuitous.
Yeah, but that's Game of Thrones,
yeah.
which has its own in-world rules for what is and is not gratuitous, and it seems like nothing is gratuitous in that world. But in Wheel of Time, particularly in regards to women, I do not recall an instance where a similar level of gratuitous punishment happens to a man. Off the top of my head, I can't think of one, but off the top of my head, I can think of 8 examples where a woman is horrifically, violently punished for not really, like Emily pointed out, not really an actual crime, like being a rapist and a murderer, but somehow pushing against the status quo. So it's, again, one thing if justice was handed down inside of the narrative for Tylan as a rapist. It's another thing for Robert Jordan to come in and just murder her in an extremely brutal and horrific and needlessly disgusting way.
Yeah, this very Final Destination way.
Yeah.
Really upsetting. Yeah, you're right. I think of the majority of male bad guys in the Wheel of Time. For one thing, I think the list is somewhat shorter. Mm-hmm. But the male bad guys include Couladin, who dies honorably, more or less, in battle.
Yeah.
Samael, Ravin, Belal, Asmodean, all just get sort of killed either off screen or in this totally non-gratuitous way by balefire or Mashadar or whatever, Samael gets eaten by sentient mist, and we don't even have to witness his death throes or whatever.
No.
Which, to be clear, I don't want.
No, I don't want to, but with women, Robert Jordan will have pages and pages of Masana being tortured or...
Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah.
So, more of the classic Robert Jordan moments.
There are also, I'm sorry, I feel like we're giving a lot of examples, but I just thought of this, so I want to offer up this other example. In terms of, justice being this is also a good parallel, because this is another rapist. In terms of justice being handed down inside the narrative, at the beginning of Knife of Dreams, I think it is, Galad confronts Morgaz's rapist, whose name I cannot at this moment remember. Valda. And challenges him to trial by combat, which is completely legal within the White Cloak realm. Not saying it's a good form of trial, but it's there. And he just dies. I mean, the sword fight is pretty tough, but he's just beheaded or whatever, and it's the end of the story.
Yeah.
And so justice is handed out neatly in a neat judicial package. Whereas with Tylan, everything is extrajudicial, literally, because it's not. There's no court involved. It's just Robert Jordan being this really gruesome thing happened to her. So I feel men are also given, in Wheel of Time, given recourse, within the law, the guy that Rand hangs for murdering somebody. Mm-hmm. If that had been a woman, something extremely horrific would have happened to her.
I mean, something extremely horrific did happen to her. Coulavir did a coup d'etat.
That's right.
Rand tried to do an extrajudicial meeting out of justice, and instead she hanged herself.
That's right.
Horribly. So, woof.
So
Robert, you sure had some issues.
Yeah, it's just again, everyone goes on about what a female-centric feminist text this is. I feel this is still a conversation we are having, but women do not even have any recourse inside the text as human beings with rights.
Yeah, so. It's sure, the Wheel of Time has a lot of women in it. a lot of women getting murdered or spanked or tortured. Like,
Yeah.
what do you want?
Yeah.
Okay, so then we get to the crux of the matter, which is Matt leaves Tylin and goes down to sort of the stable yard to wait for Egianin and the others. He is there confronted by Tuon, who's like, oh, you really are leaving. So, like, clearly she's been following him around, very stalker-like. He, with no idea what to do and worried that she'll raise an alarm of some sort, tries to, like, grab her to quiet her. But of course she's Shanshin and highly trained in self-defense. So what follows is this framed comedically fight scene between the two of them where Tuon, it is emphasized repeatedly, is a very, very small person and Matt is a normal-sized person, so he's very taken aback by how good she is at fighting and is just doing his best to stay up. And the matter is only resolved when Noel comes up behind Tuon and just grabs her, you know. And Matt gets up and, like, shoves her veil into her mouth to gag her. He uses his own scarf, which symbolically goes around the place where he was hanged, also to gag her. And so she's restrained by him and Noel. Hilariously, he does put her little tiara back on her head. And Noel's just like, yeah, I had a pretty good idea you'd be leaving tonight, what with all the, you know, preparations. And Matt's like, yeah, good call. And Noel's like, okay, so I'll come with you. What should we do with her? Matt's like, we'll just, you know, tie her up and toss her in a stable. At around this point, Egianin and her people come, including Julian and Thera, who immediately prostrates herself.
Prostrates herself?
Okay.
I know, it's a weird word.
Who immediately is like,
the other word.
so close to the other word. Thera's like, prostrates herself, and Egianin and everyone else walking into the room who are Shanshin panic. Egianin here refers to Tuon as the daughter of the Nine Moons. Matt's like, holy shit, she's my wife. And everyone's like, please don't say that. And he's like, no, you don't get it. She's my wife. She's my wife. He says it 3 times. And either before or after this, Seleucia comes up and is like, this is foolishness. No matter what the omens said, you shouldn't do this. And Matt's like, chill out, lady. But she's obviously talking to Tuon. Or obviously to us.
Yeah.
And Noel's like, should we throw her in a hayloft too? And Matt's like, no, we're gonna take them both with us. So, here are the main points I want to make about that scene. It's very mythological. Again, Matt kidnapping Tuon and her maidservant is very reminiscent of a lot of stories in mythology. The one that will come to most people's mind is Persephone and Hades, and as we've already referenced, Matt and Tuon both have wealth and underworld overtones to them. So that idea is omnipresent throughout this scene. It is interesting to watch this sort of crash down on Matt. The idea that this thing that he has been aware of and avoiding for a really long time is suddenly confronting him. Matt, as always, I think, has the most interesting reactions to things happening. The major point I want to make is that this is highly out of character for Matt. Matt is a character who struggles really hard against fate and what's supposed to happen. And to a certain extent, his character arc in the series proper is about eventually, like, learning to give in to things that are fated. I think this moment is meant to be part of that character arc, but I think it's a little too early for it. And because of the way Matt and Tuon's relationship has heretofore been framed, I think it makes it look like Matt is sort of reacting out of this sort of, like, I don't know what else to call it, but like a horniness in a sort of way. Like he's just having this gut, pretty lady reaction, kidnap, which is gross.
Yeah.
Yeah. As opposed to Matt, you know, because it's Matt, we don't get really a lot of insight into what exactly he's thinking.
Right.
Probably because Matt himself doesn't have a lot of insight into what exactly he's thinking. He's not really a great one for self-reflection. But, like, it's not like Matt is, like, okay, I have to do this because I am finally giving in to the idea that I have to accept my fate. It would be so much more interesting, in my opinion, if we are, accepting the overall thesis that Tuon has to be the daughter of the Nine Moons, which I inherently argue against. We have already sort of stated that Tuon's an insufferable character and she will not get any less so. But if we sort of accept that thesis, then I would argue that the much more interesting and the much more in-character thing to do would be for Matt to let her go. To, stick with the Hayloft plan, and then for her to pursue their fate as a couple. But, I mean, as a plot, it was clear that Robert Jordan didn't know how else to force them into the same room together to build a relationship. To his minimal credit, he obviously didn't want to have two people get married who literally don't know each other at all. But then, once you it's not like getting to know Tuon improves her in any way. And in fact, getting to know her makes Matt worse somehow by association.
No, I agree 100%. The fact that Matt is willing to... I just read a very, very rancid scene in Knife of Dreams regarding Tuon. One of many very, very rancid scenes.
And the
fact
bad.
that Matt isn't like, I don't actually give a fuck what fate says. This is a bad person.
Yeah.
Really reflects poorly on him. And the fact it just it really does tank Matt's character in a lot of ways. It's really upsetting.
Yeah, we all joke about Brandon Sanderson committing character assassination on Matt, but in reality, Robert Jordan sort of took that into his own hands right around here when he just decided Matt's going to have a relationship with the Empress of a fascist country, which, the power base of which is enslaving women and doing a whole lot of other authoritarian junk. So yeah, this is a scene that I think if you're just reading pure surface level comes off as very satisfying because it is mythologically big. It's this really important moment in terms of any time that one of those prophecies that Matt had way back in book 4 comes back around, it's really satisfying.
Yeah.
But if you delve at all deeper, or if you sort of reflect on this, or if you stop and say to yourself, is Tuon really a person? Is this really a relationship that I want to be happening? No. And it's all just sort of pretty bad.
Yeah, a couple things. One, I agree with you that it is very, very out of character, and that's the first thing that struck me when I read this scene, is for Matt to be like, Matt, who not only rejects prophecy, but has been rejecting the concept and institution of marriage since day one.
Yeah.
Not being like, okay, now I know who she is, and now I know exactly how to avoid her.
Yeah.
That feels much more in character.
I know
for
who
Matt.
she is. Kill on sight, you know?
Yeah, just be like, yep, leave her in a hayloft. I don't want anything to do with her.
Yep.
That feels much more on brand. That's also what he's done pretty much with all of the other prophecies. Like, there's a very satisfying arc with him becoming a general because he's like, I don't want to be in a battle. Like, every time it's like, I don't want to be here, I don't want to be here, and it just kind of escalates into sort of, like, reluctance, acceptance,
Yeah.
and then stepping into it. Like, there's that longer game, like you were talking about. So, it's really frustrating, and I agree with you that there's a certain level of, like, and this feels the way with Matt's relationship with Tuon in general, and perhaps that's because we don't get a lot of Tuon's points of views early in the relationship, so it does feel very one-sided. But Matt has, like, a very weird slide into being very obsessed with Tuon very quickly. And that's not to say people, and obsessed might be not the right word, but, like, she's pretty much all he thinks about and all he's focused on in his chapters in both Crossroads of Twilight and even more so in Knife of Dreams. And I know that's over the course of 2 books, so maybe that's not quite as bad as I'm thinking of it. It just feels very egregious because I'm very much in it.
I think probably what makes it worse is the pivot point. Matt is coming out of a really, really rough situation in Ebujar.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Sexually and romantically and whatnot, and then sliding right into his relationship with Tuon is super weird. Like, there's no, I don't know, downtime, recovery period.
Yeah.
It just, the intersection of those two plot lines is always going to read really poorly for me. And, like, I think you're right that Matt, like, and we'll get into it more as we get into those 2 books, but Matt's sort of interest in Tuan is egregious, and Robert Jordan seems to be writing it as a sort of, like, attempt at romance.
Right.
And as a way to deviate from Matt's usual attitude toward women, which is very, I don't know, sort of, wow, I can't think of the word, very, like, side questy.
Yeah.
You know, Matt will see a pretty lady and go over, and it'll be a couple paragraphs, and then Matt is usually thinking about something bigger going on. And women and romance are, in his life, sort of, not the main point. And so Robert Jordan is trying to be like, yeah, this is his wife, so of course she's immediately going to be the main thing that he's focusing on. And I'm like, how? He has so many other things to think about and worry about.
Nope. It's just Tuan, and how is he going to get Tuan to like him? And does Tuan like him? And it's like, it feels... I talked about this a lot in my last Knife of Dreams blog, and I'm not going to remember exactly how I said it. I feel like I was able to articulate it pretty well. I'm not going to get it all. When we get into Knife of Dreams, I'll revisit it. But the whole plot just feels very suffocating. That's how I feel about it.
I think it's the Matt version of the Perrin and Fail rescue plot. Because, once again, we are deviating from the main quest of the series to deal with things that are not exactly relevant to the main series and are more to do with, like, it's like Robert Jordan is suddenly like, this is going to be a character-focused series.
Yeah.
And you're like, it has never been, Robert. It's always been very plot-driven.
Yeah.
So having this suddenly be like, let's see what happens to Perrin when his wife is kidnapped and how he reacts. And let's see what Matt does when he's confronted with the reality of matrimony, you know?
Yeah.
Like, those aren't things we need to spend 2 or more books on. So when we do spend 2 books on them, it's like, first of all, it makes you feel really suffocated, and second of all, it makes you feel like Robert Jordan didn't know what he was doing, because he didn't.
Yeah. And it's also just like, trying not to be totally negative. I've been in a very negative space about Wheel of Time in general lately, so apologies if I've been a bit of a downer. Just struggling a bit. But, you talked about how mythological this scene, like the kidnapping scene with Tuan is. It's also very tropey on, like, a more surface level, the idea of the kidnapped princess or the runaway princess, or, you know, having a kind of almost enemies to lovers situation going on. So it does feel very tropey. And that way I could see how it's got all the right set pieces to be fun and interesting in terms of, like, mythology and tropes and the satisfaction of prophecy. But it's all just tanked because Tuan is a rancid person.
Yeah.
She does not believe that women who can channel have any agency. She also, in the entire fight scene, and I know this is, like, good strategy if you are fighting someone, but she targets Matt's injured leg the entire fight. And again, I know that's good strategy if someone is kidnapping you. But it just feels like... And she also calls him toy.
Oh, yeah.
Which she does repeatedly. So it just, like, doesn't set her up as a person who will ever have any respect for Matt. Like, all she does immediately is, like, dehumanize him and then attack his weaknesses. Which, again, I know he's kidnapping her, so it's hard to... So, like, of course she's in the right to not have positive feelings towards her kidnapper, but it's just, like...
Okay, but, like, she was the one who confronted him.
No, okay, you got a good point.
You know?
You got a good point.
You see a guy leaving, a guy who's bigger than you. You don't have to be like, hey, son... Heading out.
Hey, Hoss, where are you going?
Yeah, what's up, Chief? You know, she's just like, you girl, just hide. Go get the guards.
Yeah.
If you are actually invested in stopping him.
Yeah, like you're so right. There is another solution. So she's just set up as this, like, rancid, mean person who's going to attack Matt's weaknesses, which is what she does throughout, at least up to where I am. She's constantly exploiting him. So it's just kind of like... You're not a fun person, and I'm not happy that Matt is with this person. I know we have a bit of Matt favoritism over here at the podcast, but, like, if you're going to force a marriage plotline on a character who's been sort of, like, bachelor for life TM, like, at least he could have, I don't know, a pleasant wife who is nice to him.
Yeah, make it feel less hellish.
Yeah. Or just lean into the idea that it's an arranged marriage. Doesn't
I don't know,
have to
would've
be
been
a
interesting.
romance.
Would have been interesting on a certain level.
Yeah.
Rand was just like, hello, daughter of the 9 moons.
This is Matt.
This is Matt. Would you like to marry him? Or, I mean, that's how, like, it all could come back around, you know?
Yeah.
Matt leaves her. Then, in the hayloft or whatever, she then eventually meets with Rand. Says, I'll marry someone. How about to arrange a treaty or something?
Yeah.
He's like, great, I've got the guy for you.
Rand hilariously, instead of picking anyone noble, is like, how about Matt?
How about Matt?
Tybalt.
Oh, Tybalt,
You
what
don't
are
need to be
doing?
in the drawer. So...
Don't look at us, Tybalt, like that.
So it's just, I can see how it is a fun setup, and I know people have talked fondly about, like, the kind of hilarity Shakespearean comedy of errors that is kidnapping your wife and joining the circus with her.
Yeah.
But it just, like, is just, the whole situation is just ruined for me. And I think you're so right. You really hit it on the head that it's like, there's no recovery for Matt between the trauma of Thailand and then the sort of exploitation that Tuon puts on top of him. So,
Rough go of it for Matt Cathon. Real character assassination, also. But those are those 2 chapters.
they sure are.
Unfortunately, Matt will not be, you know, the relief, the solace that he's provided for us heretofore for the next few books, which is rough. Where will we turn? Where will I turn for peace? That's a Mormon hymn.
Where will I turn for peace?
I
Now
don't
I
know.
just have to depend on side characters.
Yeah.
The 30
all I can
seconds
do.
Gaul is on screen is all I have to live
Yeah,
for.
Grady and Neald. TM.
Grady, speaking of men who should be in love.
I know.
I know Grady has a wife whom he loves, but
Okay, but what if Grady
had a
and
wife
his
and a
wife
husband.
and Neald all got to have a lovely polyamorous relationship?
Yeah, Grady's wife was like, I love this man. And Grady's like, thank God, I also love this man.
Let's combine forces. Okay, but that's it from us for episode 200.
What? It is kind of funny that we hit these of all chapters on episode 200. Because like you said, there's kind of like a feeling of
Yeah.
culmination to them.
Really. We'll just skip least favorite and favorite characters because our least favorite character will obviously be Tuon and our favorite character will obviously be Nerim and Lopin.
Yeah, obviously. Nerim and Lopin, it's like one word.
Nerim and Lopin, hyphenated. But thanks for listening for 200 episodes if you've done that.
I know. Wow. If you've been with us since the beginning, you deserve a cookie, and I hope
Deserve
you
a
go buy
medal,
yourself
yeah.
one. You deserve a treat.
And you know, if you've only been here for a little while, welcome to you too. Join the party.
You can also get a treat, but a slightly smaller one.
Thanks to Glenna McKenzie for our theme song, which has not been with us since the beginning, but we have definitely improved as a podcast since acquiring it.
I agree.
Thank you, Glenna.
She was the fated moment for us.
Thanks to our patrons on Patreon and our followers on social media. Do you have anything to add?
I don't think so.
Do you have a sign-off?
I do. It's related to last week's sign-off in that since I made fun of the Spotify algorithm providing me with
no.
Glee songs, it's like all it does now.
Is it because I, in the house, have been watching a video about...
It's possible. It's possible. It's reading the data in the air or whatever robots do. I don't know.
I'm sorry if it's my fault. I just want to know what the drama is in Glee.
I mean, Glee is very funny to have summarized. It is not fun to watch. So I think you're doing it right. But no, it's just been that makes more sense because I'm like, mostly what I'm listening to these days is K-pop. So how is the algorithm going from BTS?
Funnily enough, Spotify has not been recommending Glee songs to me.
It's because it's doing it to me.
You're being victimized.
I'm being victimized for your
by
crimes.
Glee and Spotify. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.